Mas Oyama, known as a pioneer of full-contact karate, can be seen in numerous surviving old photographs interacting with many of Japan's leading martial artists of his time, including Masahiko Kimura, Gogen Yamaguchi, and prominent figures from the Okinawan karate world. Oyama is also widely known for stories such as defeating rampaging American soldiers in the chaotic period immediately after World War II, fighting bulls barehanded, and achieving consecutive victories against professional wrestlers and boxers after traveling to the United States. However, debates over the authenticity of these stories continue to this day. In this video, we will deliberately avoid focusing on such famous anecdotes. Not only in Oyama's case, but for many founders of martial arts, there exist episodes that appear to have been embellished or created after the fact, and the boundary between myth and reality is often unclear. Oyama can be described as one of the first media-era martial artists, having skillfully utilized manga and other forms of media to their fullest potential. As a result, the number of stories surrounding him far exceeds those of other martial artists. On the other hand, English-language materials about Oyama remain relatively limited compared to those available in Japanese. In this video, we will focus primarily on information that is not widely known outside Japan. While Japanese sources and testimonies are not necessarily all factual, carefully examining them allows lesser-known aspects of Oyama to emerge. Compared to other martial artists, his connections with contemporaries were exceptionally broad. And combined with the complex historical background related to his origins, this video will be somewhat longer in length. Please note that this video is based on information published in Japan, but it does not assert that all such information is definitive fact. We ask for your understanding as you watch. Kyokushin karate, the root of almost all full-contact karate styles, has had a profound influence not only within the karate world, but also on striking martial arts worldwide. Although indirectly, it played a major role in the birth of kickboxing, the development of Dutch kickboxing, and even the emergence of the first foreign, Japanese champion in Muay Thai history. The founder of Kyokushin karate is Masutatsu Oyama, known internationally as Mas Oyama. Masutatsu Oyama was his Japanese name. His birth name was Chae-Yong-e. He was a Korean born under Japanese colonial rule and thus legally considered Japanese at the time. He has stated in TV interviews and his writings that, during his childhood in Manchuria, he witnessed an elderly laborer of Korean origin subdue a large man who practiced Mongolian wrestling and was behaving outrageously while drunk, and that learning the principle of chakuriki from that man inspired him to pursue the martial path. Let's take a look at a performance by a man who was introduced in Japan as a practitioner of chakuriki. The one delivering the kicks is Igari Genshu, originally from Nippon Kempo, who knocked out 3 active Muay Thai champions, won domestic kickboxing titles in 2 weight classes, and captured the WKA middleweight title. How these kinds of performances actually connect to real combat sports remains unclear. However, according to Japanese sources from the period of Korea under Japanese rule, chakuriki appears to have been a form of training in which one would retreat deep into the mountains, discipline both mind and body, and seek to attain power beyond ordinary human limits. It is said that Hideo Nakamura, a Korean-born karate practitioner, also studied chakuriki. There are also references to this martial art in the writings of Yasuhiro Konishi, who was awarded the title of Kyoshi by the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai. The name of this martial art, or perhaps a method of mental and physical training, is also used by the prestigious kickboxing dojo Chakuriki Gym in Holland, which has produced world-famous champions. It is said that the name was derived from Chakuriki, which Mas Oyama had mastered, and that the owner, Tom Harlick, had also studied Kyokushin karate in his youth. Personally, it gives the impression of being closer to Japan's mountain worship traditions and the ascetic practices of Shugendo. Practitioners of Shugendo, a tradition passed down in Japan since ancient times, are known as Yamabushi. They are ascetics who undergo spiritual training deep in the mountains in order to attain powers that transcend human ability. It is said that within Japanese martial arts, there exist schools of swordsmanship and staff techniques that were transmitted from the Yamabushi. Their training is extremely harsh, involving rituals such as chanting mantras before roaring flames, walking barefoot over fire, and standing beneath waterfalls to purify the body. It is also believed that the practice of standing under waterfalls as a form of spiritual discipline among Japanese martial artists has its roots in Yamabushi training. A few years before Oyama left for Manchuria, Japan had already begun steering toward a major war. On September 18, 1931, the Kanto Army, acting on the independent initiative of staff officers Kanji Ishihara and Seishiro Itagaki, blew up a section of track on the South Manchuria Railway, the Mukden Incident. They falsely blamed Chinese forces and used it as a pretext to engage them, leading to the occupation of Manchuria. Although this action was unauthorized, senior Japanese command ultimately approved it after the fact. The outcome did not fully match Ishihara's original vision, but in 1932, Japan established the puppet state of Manchukuo. The League of Nations condemned Japan, prompting its withdrawal in 1933. Japan became increasingly isolated from the international community. Tensions between Japan and China escalated, culminating in the Second Sino-Japanese War, a major turning point in history. Around this period, Oyama is said to have returned to Korea, where he studied boxing. Boxing, which had only recently been introduced to Japan from the United States, reportedly gained explosive popularity in colonial Korea. Given Oyama's early dedication to the martial path, it is easy to imagine that he would have been drawn to it. However, due to a lack of sources, it remains unclear whether he trained independently or belonged to a gym. In 1939, a Korean thinker named So Neichu, Japanese pronunciation, visited Busan from mainland Japan and gave a lecture promoting the East Asia League movement. During this event, So demonstrated the basic techniques of Goju-ryu karate, which he was studying. Oyama, who was in the audience, was deeply impressed by So's ideology and decided to go to Japan. So Neichu was a fervent supporter of the East Asia League founded by Kanji Ishihara, one of the masterminds behind the Mukden incident, and also served as his bodyguard and close aide. Ishihara envisioned the formation of an East Asian Federation under the Emperor of Japan, uniting Japan, Manchuria, and China. He advocated for shared national defense, economic integration, political independence, and cultural exchange, while repeatedly insisting that local autonomy should be entrusted to each respective region. It is said that these ideas gained him support, even among colonized peoples, including Koreans. He is also said to have had a bitter rivalry with Tojo Hideki, the Imperial Japanese Army general, president of the Dai Nippon Butokukai, and the 40th Prime Minister of Japan, due to fundamental differences in their governing philosophies and political views. After the end of the Pacific War, Ishihara appeared as a witness at a special branch court in Sakata, Yamagata, during the Tokyo trials, where war criminals were prosecuted. This special court was set up by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East in order to interrogate Ishihara, who was bedridden at the time. During the questioning, Ishihara stated,
"I was the person most deeply involved in the founding of Manchu. If Japan's war responsibility is to be judged, then I should be the #1 war criminal. Put me on trial first."
He demanded that he himself be designated as a war criminal. However, because he had been sidelined after coming into conflict with Hideki Tojo, he ultimately avoided prosecution. As an aside, it is said that when Ishihara was transported to the special court while ill, the handcart carrying him was pulled by So and Oyama. Let's return to the story of a teenage Oyama in Busan, listening to So's speech. Oyama later followed him to Japan. His original purpose in going to Japan may have been to study the ideology of the East Asia League, with karate training being only secondary. After arriving in Japan, he studied Shotokan karate under Gichin Funakoshi, though it is believed that direct instruction came from Gigo Funakoshi. He earned a black belt in just 1 year. On the other hand, there is also a theory that he did not study Shotokan karate. However, Konishi, the founder of Shindo Jinenryu, who studied under Funakoshi Gichin, testified that Funakoshi often took Oyama with him when he went out. There are also specific testimonies from other senior disciples. The following is an interview with Okano Tomozaburo, who trained alongside Oyama under Funakoshi.
I once spent some time teaching karate at a U.S. military camp in Sagamihara, and it seems that Oyama was also instructing at the same place. When he learned about this, I heard that Oyama said, "I'd like to see him again after such a long time." The year before last, I attended a celebratory gathering as a representative of Master Otaka Ichizo, an old disciple from the days when Master Funakoshi first taught karate at the Okinawan Prefectural Dormitory, Meishu Juku. When he was young, Otaka-sensei was very fond of Oyama, but since he was undergoing medical treatment, I attended in his place. Because it was during the tournament, we didn't have much time to talk, but that was the last time I met Oyama.
On December 8, 1941, the Pacific War broke out. In 1942, while he was enrolled at the Yamanashi Aviation School to become an aircraft mechanic, there is testimony from the daughter of a local family who rescued him when he collapsed from hunger on the street. Feeling sorry for him, the family, who ran a general store called Kokusai Shokai, took Oyama in as a lodger. According to her recollection, Oyama was, for that time, exceptionally large in build. He would often do shadow boxing in the yard wearing boxing gloves, and because he was relied upon by other youths in the neighborhood, he would sometimes be called out to help in fights, returning home afterward with large amounts of sweets. According to Oyama's own account, he began practicing judo after coming to Japan, and around 1943 he became a member of Funakoshi's school, Shotokan. However, when the dojo was destroyed in an air raid in 1944, training in karate became impossible. Like many Koreans at the time, Oyama is believed to have been mobilized as a laborer and worked on military-related civil engineering projects at a work camp on the outskirts of Tateyama in Chiba Prefecture until the end of the war. However, as mentioned earlier, the trigger for Oyama's move to Japan was a speech by So that he saw in Busan, Korea. According to So, Oyama visited the Gihokai in Kyoto and asked to become his disciple. The Gihokai was one of the largest dojos in Japan at the time, founded by Fukushima Kyozaburo, an instructor at a martial arts vocational school established by the Dai Nippon Butokukai. Fukushima was also a devoted supporter of the Toa Renmei, East Asia League. Through connections with the Toa Renmei, the dojo was used by Yamaguchi Gogen, one of the top students of Miyagi Chojun of Goju Ryu, and Yamaguchi's foremost disciple, So, who taught karate there by renting the space. Masahiko Kimura, known for his victory over Helio Gracie, frequently visited the Gihokai dojo, brought there by his teacher Ushijima Tatsukuma. Fukushima was Ushijima's senior, and he too supported the Toa Renmei. Oyama, still very young at the time and physically slight, was said by Cho to have been polite in demeanor, yet already had a deep voice and an intimidating presence. From this, it is likely that he learned karate at this dojo even before joining Shotokan. At that time, Oyama had not yet begun judo training, and he stated that he was only taught the basics, such as how to strike a makiwara and how to kick. His full-scale training began after the war. Although Oyama claimed to have met Kimura at Takushoku University, there is also a theory that he was never actually enrolled there. In any case, it is highly likely that Oyama and Kimura met and developed their relationship at the Gihokai dojo. Oyama reportedly admired Kimura like an older brother or a hero. Next to the Gihokai building, Fukushima built a dormitory for foreign students, and according to one account, Oyama stayed there. An examination of why Oyama may have distorted the story of his encounter with So will be discussed later. It can be said that Oyama's true teacher in practical combat-oriented karate was in fact this man, So. In his youth, Oyama placed such an overwhelming emphasis on real fighting that he reportedly focused almost exclusively on sandbag training, sparring, and weightlifting. Even within mainland Goju-ryu karate, which was relatively progressive at the time in actively incorporating kumite, senior practitioners would sometimes caution him to also train kata and engage in spiritual discipline. That is how much his kata practice had been neglected. Nevertheless, it is said that his strength in sparring was exceptional. This man, So, is generally known only for his role as a thinker. He had once been imprisoned as a political offender, and after the war, he even rose to become the head of an organization representing pro-South Korean residents in Japan. Many are unaware that he was also a martial artist, but in reality, he possessed an extraordinary martial background. In his student days, he trained in weightlifting and boxing, even becoming an amateur welterweight boxing champion. After coming to Japan, he studied judo and karate. He trained alongside Yamaguchi Gogen, the top disciple on the Japanese mainland of Miyagi Chojun, the founder of Goju Ryu Karate. Ultimately, So attained the rank of 9th Dan in Goju Ryu and served as a special advisor to the All Japan Karate Do Gojukai. He was also like a junior brother to Ushijima Tatsukuma, the teacher of Kimura Masahiko. Through this connection, he learned judo from Ushijima and others, reaching the level of 4th Dan in Kodokan Judo. He even gave Kimura Masahiko his first instruction in karate, which likely led to Kimura's later meeting with Oyama. This is a famous photograph taken after a prestigious martial arts demonstration held in Kyoto. Among those pictured are Mabuni Kenwa, a leading figure of Okinawan karate and founder of Shito Ryu, Sanosuke Ueshima, founder of Kushin Ryu, Konishi Yasuhiro, founder of Shinto Jinen Ryu, Otsuka Hironori, founder of Wado Ryu, Yamada Tatsuo, founder of Nippon Kempo Karate Do, and Yamaguchi Gogen, the foremost mainland disciple of Miyagi Chojun. And among these giants who represent the dawn of mainland Japanese karate stands this man. Despite such an extraordinary resume, his name is scarcely spoken in the martial arts world. Perhaps this is due to the shadow cast by his tumultuous life, one that seems to encapsulate the darker complexities of post-war Japanese history. As for the life of this man, which may even surpass that of Oyama, that is a story for another time. Oyama is believed to have been engaged in military-related civil engineering work at a labor camp on the outskirts of Tateyama in Chiba Prefecture, where he witnessed the end of the war. After the end of the Pacific War, Koreans who remained in Japan were eventually divided into pro-North Korea and pro-South Korea factions. However, this division was not based on their own or their parents' original place of origin, but rather on ideological differences. On October 15, 1945, 2 months after the end of the war, the League of Koreans in Japan was established under the leadership of communists, who would later align with North Korea. Many former colonial powers gave people from their colonies, who had established their lives in the metropole, the choice of either acquiring citizenship in that country upon independence or returning to their homeland. Japan, however, chose a policy of unilaterally stripping them of their nationality. In addition, unresolved compensation for industrial accident victims, unpaid wages by companies, and government restrictions on the transfer of assets made it difficult for them to return to Korea. Suddenly placed in an unstable position under international law, it is said that about 90% of them joined the League of Koreans in Japan, which was initially thought to be a mutual aid organization. At the time of its founding, its platform included goals such as ensuring the stability of life for Koreans in Japan, facilitating and organizing repatriation, and promoting mutual friendship and concession with the Japanese people. Many who joined likely hoped for support in negotiating unpaid wages or assistance with repatriation. However, the League had close ties with the Japanese Communist Party, which at the time sometimes resorted to violence to achieve its aims, though it has since abandoned such methods and received funding from it. As a result, it quickly took on a strong communist character and transformed into a more militant organization, at times acting as its vanguard. Amid the chaos across Japan following the war, also fueled by backlash against wartime oppression, incidents such as assaults, looting, coercive demands on government offices, illegal occupation of buildings, fare evasion on public transportation, and so-called people's tribunals occurred. Memories of this period have contributed to a tendency in Japan to view Koreans in Japan, regardless of North or South affiliation, with hostility. Those who had cooperated with the Japanese government or military during the colonial period became targets of denunciation, facing confiscation of property and, at times, assassination. A prominent example is Park Chun-gyum, the first Korean member of the pre-war Imperial Diet, who strove to become a model Japanese citizen and directly petitioned the Prime Minister of the time to establish a volunteer soldier system for Koreans. It is said that a list circulated calling for the assassination of 9 individuals, including Park Chun-gyum. His residence was attacked, but he escaped harm as he was absent. Later, part of his property, including real estate, was confiscated under the guise of donations. Followers of the East Asia League such as So and Oyama were also regarded as traitors to their people by communist Koreans in Japan. According to Hiroshi Kinjo, a senior disciple of Kanken Toyama, himself a karate researcher, after Japan's defeat, all martial arts were banned by the GHQ. However, this ban did not apply to Koreans, and while other martial arts were forced into a period of stagnation for several years, karate was able to continue developing as a martial art. It is also recorded that So frequently visited the Kanbukan, together with Oyama, who at the time used the name Muko Oyama. The Kanbukan was headed by Yun Huibyong, another senior disciple of Toyama and a direct successor to the Shurite lineage of Anko Itosu. The instructors listed in Sport Karate magazine were as follows. Director, Yun Huibyong, first vice president of the Korean Taekwondo Association. Kunkin Toyama, disciple of Itosu, a leading karate authority. So Neichu, right-hand man of Gogen Yamaguchi. Hiroshi Kinjo, founder of Armored Karate. Kanki Izumi Kawa, founder of Goju-Ryu Senbukai. Masutatsu Oyama, founder of Kyokushin Karate. It is noteworthy that Yun, who later became deeply involved in the founding of Taekwondo, served as director while having studied under leading karate elders of the time such as Toyama and Kenwa Mabuni. Prominent Okinawan karate masters who had relocated to mainland Japan were also among the instructors. In later years, when Kinjo interviewed Oyama for a karate magazine, Oyama appeared somewhat hesitant and even apologetic about speaking on karate in front of Kinjo, suggesting that he regarded Kinjo as a senior and held him in high respect. Kinjo himself recalled that during the Kanbuken period, Oyama seemed more focused on his own training than on teaching others. According to Oyama, after leaving the Kanbukan, he opened a dojo in Ogikubo, but soon realized he was not yet skilled enough to teach. It was then that he met So and began studying Goju-Ryu karate under him. It may be that the inconsistencies often seen in Oyama's accounts of chronology stem from his tendency to avoid discussing his time with the Gihokai, an era heavily colored by political and ideological influences, as well as the period of ethnic activism introduced next. With the end of the Pacific War, Japan lay in ruins, and its people in extreme poverty came together to rebuild the nation. Meanwhile, Koreans who remained in Japan, having barely had a moment to breathe after their liberation from colonial rule, soon found themselves entering a new struggle. In the post-war period, while the majority of resident Koreans were absorbed into communist organizations, young Koreans in Japan with nationalist views separately formed the Korean Youth Alliance for the Promotion of Nation Building in November 1945. Due to its secretive nature, there are various accounts. So served as the leader of this organization for 3 terms. Those who withdrew from the rapidly communizing League of Koreans in Japan, as well as Yun, the head of the Kanbukan, and others who sympathized with So's ideology, joined this movement. Later, Jong Geon-yong, a powerful figure in the Yakuza world, also joined them. In preparation for armed conflict, that same year Oyama, together with So, established a Karate Research Institute within the Central Youth Training Center of the Alliance. This was the dojo in Ogikubo that Oyama referred to earlier. Furthermore, in January 1946, individuals who had ideologically broken away from Chorin, the communist camp, formed the new Korean Construction League. At 1:30 a.m. on July 20th of the same year, approximately 100 members of Minsei, the communist camp's action unit, armed with pistols, Japanese swords and clubs, rode in 3 trucks, broke through an American military police MP checkpoint at Rakugo Bridge, and attacked the Kawasaki Yotsuya branch of Kensei. After that, they attacked Korean residential areas in Yokohama, abducted 10 leaders of Kensei, the opposing faction, took them to a Minsei hideout in Itabashi, and assaulted them. On the same day, members of Minsei attacked the Kensei Honjo branch. Meanwhile, Kensei members carried out retaliatory attacks on the Arakawa and Ueno branches of Chorin. On July 22nd, the MP command summoned representatives of Chorin and Kensei, along with the head of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Security Division, and warned them to prevent further clashes. In October of the same year, the new Korean Construction League merged with Kensei to form the Resident Korean Union in Japan, later aligned with South Korea, making its anti-communist stance more explicit. The two sides continued violent confrontations within Japan. Oyama and the Yakuza boss Jong were central figures on the front lines during clashes between organizations, repeatedly engaging in fights against large groups. Oyama and his associates, who were quick to resort to physical force, were said to have had a poor reputation among ethnic activists at the time. Later, So went on to serve as the head of this organization. Incidentally, its first leader, Pak Yeol, is said to have been abducted by North Korean special forces during a banquet in South Korea and subsequently executed in North Korea. Afterward, So held a number of positions, including director of the planning office of the resident Korean Union in Japan, standing committee member of the political division of the Korean mission in Japan, and head of the Korean Youth Corps. In 1947, Jung Geon-yong, based in Ginza, Tokyo, formed a Yakuza organization using his own group as its foundation. Sympathizing with So Neichu's pan-Asianist ideology and guided by the principle of listening to the voice of the East, he established this organization as a counterbalance to the League of Koreans in Japan, Soren. Even today in Japan, there remains a strong tendency for negative sentiment toward Koreans from both the North and the South, and one of the major sources of this may lie in these series of events. Oyama became involved in a near-violent dispute with Yang Won-seok, the boss of a militant Yakuza organization that had shaken Japan's underworld at the time through a certain incident. Although both parties obscure the details of the conflict, the outcome was that they took a liking to each other, became sworn brothers, and maintained that relationship for the rest of their lives.
It was during the chaotic period immediately after the war that I first met Director Oyama. When I think back to our first meeting, I believe we were on the verge of a fight almost coming to blows. However, I don't remember what triggered it, but after that we completely hit it off. And since then we have maintained a relationship like brothers.
As will be discussed later, this relationship with Yang Won-seok, who was particularly notorious even within the Yakuza world, proved to be highly beneficial for Kyokushin karate. This is a photograph of Oyama said to have been taken during his Kensei period. One of Oyama Masutatsu's famous episodes, his mountain retreat training, actually took place during his time at a training camp of the Korean Youth League for National Foundation. Concerned that Oyama's reckless behavior would eventually cost him his life, So and those around him advised him to undertake the retreat both as spiritual training and as a way to lie low until things calmed down. As will be explained later, the mountain retreat episode depicted in a manga based on Oyama's life tells a different story. That he spent his days fighting violently to protect defeated Japanese people from abusive American soldiers, eventually becoming a wanted man. However, the reality may be closer to him fleeing for his life due to violent struggles within radical nationalist movements. As an aside, Isao Inokuma, a judo gold medalist in the over 80 kilo class who had interactions with Oyama, once visited him in Tateyama, Chiba, one of the bases of these nationalist movements. In a magazine interview, Inokuma testified that he happened to witness Oyama preparing a handgun in anticipation of conflict with a Yakuza organization, and that Oyama at that moment exuded an intense, almost murderous aura. In 1947, around the time of his mountain retreat, a martial arts tournament organized by the Enshin Club was held at Maruyama Public Hall in Kyoto. The competition consisted of 3 disciplines: karate, judo, and kendo. However, this took place under the circumstances of GHQ occupation, during which martial arts were regarded as tied to nationalism and were strictly controlled. With the dissolution of the Dai Nippon Butokukai and other measures, the martial arts world was under severe restrictions at the time. In Great Matchmasters, Oyama wrote that he won the first All-Japan Karate Championship held in Kyoto that same year, which is believed to refer to this tournament at Maruyama Public Hall. The event was made possible through the cooperation of former Gihokai members, executives from Kyoto newspapers, and individuals with judo backgrounds. It is said that, in addition to karate and judo, events such as weightlifting were also held. So served as a referee for the karate division. While judo followed a knockout tournament format, karate matches were conducted as single bouts, with about 3 matches taking place, while other participants demonstrated kata and tamashiwari, breaking techniques. Karate sparring was conducted with protective gear, and Oyama's opponent was a police officer from Kagoshima of similar build. The result was a decisive victory for Oyama, and so witnessed him sending a telegram to Tateyama to celebrate his win. Given the historical context, this event was likely held while evading the authorities, and for that reason, it was probably forced to be scaled down in size. On August 15, 1948, the South Korean government was established. In September of the same year, Mindan was officially recognized by the Korean government as the authorized organization representing Koreans residing in Japan, and, due to its anti-communist stance, it also maintained cooperative relations with right-wing groups in Japan. As mentioned earlier, So would later serve as the head of this organization. In 1950, the Korean War broke out. The homeland of Koreans who remained in Japan became divided between the communist and democratic blocs, and war unfolded between them. So's teacher, Yamaguchi Gogen of Goju-ryu Karate, opened a dojo in Asakusa in 1950. Wrestlers from a nearby sumo stable also came to train there, and Oyama frequently visited the dojo to practice. Ultimately, Oyama was awarded the rank of 7th Dan in Goju-ryu by Yamaguchi. At this dojo, when Oyama engaged in sparring with direct strikes, Yamaguchi stopped him, saying that he must not make contact. However, Oyama argued that unless one actually strikes the opponent, it is impossible to understand how much damage can be inflicted, which led to a dispute between them. When Oyama became independent, Yamaguchi accepted it graciously. Years later, when they met again during a newspaper interview, it is said that Oyama treated him with proper respect. As time went on, Oyama gradually distanced himself from ethnic activism. In 1952, he was recommended by Ushijima Tatsukuma, the mentor of Kimura Masahiko, to participate in professional wrestling promotions in the United States. At a later selection event, a promoter gathered karate practitioners from across Japan. Many demonstrated kata, but Oyama performed feats such as breaking natural stones and wooden boards with his bare hands. This caught the promoter's attention, and his trip to the U.S. was secured. In America, he spent about 6 months touring with pro wrestling shows, giving demonstrations. Oyama later said that when he first saw professional wrestling in the U.S., he was frightened by the sight of enormous fighters he had never seen before. It seems he occasionally participated in matches, though only 1 or 2 can be verified. Interestingly, one of these bouts was conducted under jujutsu rules, and Oyama reportedly won by ippon. Although such rules were clearly disadvantageous for a karate practitioner, Oyama was likely able to adapt thanks to the judo training he had received from Ushijima at the Gihokai. The year after returning to Japan in 1953, Oyama also trained at the dojo of So Neichu, a Kodokan 9th Dan known for defeating Ushijima. Incidentally, Oyama's final rank in judo was 4th Dan. In another match, which may have had no rules, Oyama reportedly informed So from the scene that his opponent became unable to continue after he used eye gouging and a groin strike. During his stay in the United States, he also met the legendary heavyweight boxing champion Jack Dempsey. Upon his return, a celebratory gathering was held for Oyama, attended by an impressive lineup including Ushijima Tatsukuma, So Neichu, his senior from his Shotokan days, Joe Hidemi, Sawai Kenichi, Yamada Tatsuo, and Yuasa. At that gathering, Oyama is said to have spoken about aiming to create a comprehensive martial art, karate that incorporated elements of wrestling, boxing, and judo. About 2 years later, in 1954, he established the Oyama Dojo, the precursor to Kyokushin Kaikan. According to many of his top students, the training at that time was completely different from modern Kyokushin rules and was closer to what we would now call MMA. Meanwhile, according to Eiji Yasuda, who served as an assistant instructor at the time, those accounts are somewhat exaggerated. He pointed out that if training had truly been conducted in such a manner, there would have been a constant stream of injuries. Martial arts involving direct strikes to the body without protective gear were highly unorthodox in Japan at the time, and other schools reportedly mocked it as brawling karate. Nevertheless, this approach went on to produce many prominent disciples, including the founders of numerous full-contact karate styles and figures such as John Blooming, often called the father of Dutch martial arts. When it comes to the strongest nation in kickboxing, the Netherlands is often cited. However, its three major powerhouse gyms, Majiro Gym, Dojo Chakariki, and Vos Gym, are all said to have direct or indirect connections to Kyokushin karate. The first Japanese martial art to challenge Muay Thai was the Oyama Dojo, and this became the direct catalyst for the later creation of kickboxing. In the 3-on-3 match between Muay Thai fighters and the Oyama Dojo, the only loss was suffered by assistant instructor Takeshi Kurosaki. Notably, Kurosaki later became the teacher of Toshio Fujiwara, who went on to become the first foreign champion in Muay Thai history. The person who primarily trained John Blooming, often referred to as the father of Dutch martial arts, was Kenji Kurosaki. Kurosaki was known as a close associate of Masutatsu Oyama. However, according to one account, during a Muay Thai expedition, he was originally supposed to accompany the team as a coach. Despite this, he entered a match without Oyama's permission and was defeated. As a result, the compensation that had been expected from the promoter was significantly reduced, which is said to have contributed to the deterioration of their relationship. In addition, Kurosaki allegedly began recruiting Oyama's students into kickboxing without authorization, further deepening the rift between them. While Oyama introduced full-contact elements into karate, he also systematized rules that would later become the foundation of Kyokushin, such as prohibiting hand strikes to the face. This approach is thought to have been aimed at establishing karate as a respectable martial art and expanding the organization. In contrast, Kurosaki, shaped by his own experience of defeat, came to pursue what he considered real fighting, and their philosophies gradually diverged. Ultimately, it is said that Kurosaki parted ways with Oyama. Since then, Kurosaki has repeatedly made critical remarks about Oyama in publications and interviews. One of the most prestigious Dutch kickboxing gyms, Majiro Gym, developed as the Dutch branch of a gym founded by Kurosaki after his departure from Oyama. In the same year, the Oyama Dojo was established. On December 22, 1954, a historic match took place: Rikidozan versus Masahiko Kimura. Rikidozan was a superstar at the time with virtually 100% national recognition. Originally from Korea and trained in the grappling sport Sirium, he came to Japan and became a sumo wrestler. After retiring from sumo, he introduced professional wrestling from the United States and is regarded as the father of Japanese pro wrestling. Until his death, Rikidozan kept his Korean identity strictly hidden and publicly lived as a Japanese. By defeating American wrestlers with his signature karate chops, he helped restore the pride of a Japanese population still demoralized after the war, earning immense popularity. Television ratings for his matches reached as high as 64%. It was only after his death that the public learned of his Korean origins. Masahiko Kimura, the top disciple of Tatsukuma Ushijima, is widely known as the judoka who defeated Helio Gracie, and is often regarded as one of the strongest figures in the history of judo and jujutsu. After retiring from competitive judo, Kimura transitioned into professional wrestling. As mentioned earlier, Kimura was like an older brother to Masutatsu Oyama and a hero he deeply admired. The match itself was not intended to be a legitimate contest but a staged pro wrestling bout planned to end in a draw. However, at some point Rikidozan suddenly lost his temper and brutally beat Kimura. The match became shockingly violent, culminating in Rikidozan stomping on the back of Kimura's head after he had already lost consciousness. Although Rikidozan was declared the winner, he had unilaterally broken the agreement to draw and ambushed Kimura in front of a large audience. Oyama, enraged by this betrayal of someone he deeply respected, reportedly tried to attack Rikidozan on the spot and had to be restrained by those around him. According to the well-known writer Toshiya Masuda, who later investigated the incident through interviews with those involved, this account is largely true. The next day's paper reported that Rikidozan had become the strongest man in Japan. One theory claims that Oyama continued to stalk Rikidozan afterward, seeking revenge. However, he was ultimately persuaded to stand down by people around him, including the aforementioned Yakuza boss Jung, and the company president who had financially supported his trip to the United States. Later, Rikidozan and Kimura reconciled.
Senpai, are you an idiot? I'm risking my life chasing Rikidozan, and what are you doing? I will never see you again.
The hero he had admired had been treacherously ambushed, and Oyama had been prepared to risk everything to avenge him. Yet Kimura publicly reconciled through the media, effectively allowing himself to be used once more to enhance Rikidozan's image of magnanimity. Enraged by what he saw as Kimura's naivety, Oyama cut off all relations, and the two never met again. There is footage in which Mas Oyama speaks about his own martial arts philosophy in response to an incident where Nakamura, who later won the Kyokushin World Tournament twice, was involved in a violent altercation at a bar.
戦うところに男のロマンがあるんだよ。極真は背中を見せない。打ってくる喧嘩は必ず買う。これは極真のね、極真が今までの歴史だよ。君たちからね、手紙を受け取った中村誠の件で、君たちの言うも私は分かる。また支部長からも何人か私に手紙をくれた。しかしね、私は真相を知ってる。マスコミはね、おかしくね、おかしく面白くおかしく書いたんだけれども、実際問題としては中村は悪くない。歩いて言えばね、中村が酒を飲んだっていうことだけよ。中村が酒を飲んでおったんだ。言ったらね、中村は侮辱したんだもの。そしてその侮辱した連中はこれの連中だ。牛に帰ってきたんだがね、どうも腹の虫が収まらない。あんなに大きくなると思わなかったよ。だから中村がまた行ってね、片っ端から全部飛ばしてしまった。それはもういいとは言わない。だから金属の命令を出した。極真からでは背中を見せるよ。君たち喧嘩を打ってきたら買え。それぐらいの覇気がなければね、空でやめちゃえ。そんな空でやってもしょうがない。喧嘩を打ってきたら売る必要はないよ。しかし打ってくる喧嘩を買えよ。私は今までそうだったんだ。私は仲間の立場だったらね、あの騒ぎじゃないよ。もっと大きい騒ぎを起こしたかもわからないよ。喧嘩するところにね、男は価値があるよ。喧嘩的なやつはダメだ。これはね、君たちに喧嘩をしろとは言わない。だからその喧嘩の場はね、 大会でやればいいよ。自分の体がにもボロボロになるまで戦ってみたらいい。そうだったら痛さも分かる。殴り方も分かる。さばき方も分かる。避け方も分かる。蹴り方も分かる。突き方も分かる。この喧嘩の極意がね、あの殴り合いで分かるんだから。そうすると喧嘩しないよ。そうすると喧嘩、道端の喧嘩はしない。道端であったら靴を踏んだ、あるいは肩を触れた、君たちが頭下げればいいよ。頭下げて喧嘩を打ってくる人はないよ。喧嘩を打ってきたらその時には伸ばしてしまえ。何のために体やるんだ。その時には伸ばしてしまえ。戦うところに男のさっきも言ったようにロマンがあるんだよ。支部長がこういう手紙が来てる。中村のために今まで喧嘩空手って言ってそのおめえがなくなってしまったんだが、今度はね、中村がああいうことをやったがためにね、道場生が減りましたと。どうしてくれますかと。バカ野郎、そういう道場だったら閉めてしまえ。
It is a speech that offers a glimpse into Mas Oyama's martial arts philosophy. It also shows that Kimura's conduct after the match with Rikidozan was something Oyama found difficult to accept. In 1956, Oyama also studied Daido-ryu Aiki Jujutsu and stick techniques under Kozo Yoshida. In addition, he trained in judo at the So Neichu Dojo mentioned earlier, weight training under Japan's bodybuilding pioneer Takemaru Wakaki, weightlifting under Yukio Iguchi, and boxing under Piston Horiguchi, who was also known for sparring with Choki Motobu of Okinawan practical karate. He also visited and observed training sessions of Kenichi Sawai, the founder of Taikiken, and Gozo Shioda of Aikido. It is said that Mike Tyson also visited the dojo to observe training during his trip to Japan. As Oyama himself stated at a gathering, it is clear that he was aiming to transform karate into a comprehensive martial art and was exploring every possible avenue. He actively engaged in exchanges with other schools as well. Through Hiroshi Kinjo of Kanbukan, he became acquainted with leading figures of Okinawan karate such as Yuchoku Higa, then president of the Okinawa Karate Federation. Higa is a Shorin-ryu karate practitioner and a leading figure in traditional Okinawan karate, having also held key positions in the Okinawa Karate-do Federation. He is also said to have interacted with Seiken Shukumine of Taido. In 1957, Oyama participated, alongside Hiroshi Kinjo and Sadaharu Fujimoto, in the first karate demonstration tournament organized by Hideo Nakamura, a senior member of Chongryon, the North Korean-aligned organization, which had effectively been the opposing side in the ethnic struggles Oyama had been involved in during his youth. At the second tournament held the following year, prominent karate figures who would later lead the karate world gathered to perform demonstrations, including Hiroshi Kinjo, Sadaharu Fujimoto, Gogen Yamaguchi, Masatoshi Nakayama, and Hirokazu Kanazawa. However, like many other schools, the Oyama Dojo gradually sought to balance safety and competitiveness for the sake of wider dissemination. In 1964, with Eisaku Sato, who would go on to have the longest continuous tenure as Prime Minister, as its chairman, the Kyokushin Kaikan was established and the rules of Kyokushin karate were formalized. This development parallels how judo evolved from jujutsu by removing dangerous techniques and transforming into a sport. During the Oyama Dojo era, training had assumed real street combat and was close to no rules. However, the later introduction of rules, such as banning strikes to the face with hands or elbows, prohibiting grabbing, throws, and joint techniques, resulted in a reduction of real combat effectiveness. This may be considered one of the drawbacks, feared and even mocked by Kurosaki after parting ways with Oyama, of placing too much emphasis on safety. In 1969, when the Kyokushin Kaikan was gradually increasing its number of students, there was an attempt by the All-Japan Karate-do Federation, Zenku-ren, to absorb it. The Sasagawa Ryoichi mentioned was a central figure in Japan's right-wing movement, a former Class A war crime suspect, and a man known for having connections with the CIA. So Neichu refers to a former top disciple of Mas Oyama and the head of Shidokan Karate. Yanagawa refers to the Japanese name of Yang Won-seok, the boss of one of Japan's most formidable militant Yakuza organizations at the time, who had a sworn brother relationship with Oyama. The All-Japan Karate-do Federation was established with the aim of unifying the various domestic karate styles such as Shotokan and Goju-ryu. At the time, its chairman was Ryoichi Sasagawa, a powerful right-wing figure and head of the Japan Shipbuilding Industry Foundation. He met Oyama at the Akasaka restaurant Kyokushin and requested,
"We will offer you an executive position in the Federation, so please come under our umbrella."
Oyama refused. He openly mocked the Federation's non-contact rules as dance karate, and the two sides entered into a fierce conflict. His opponent was Sasagawa, a man with immense influence in political and business circles. How did Oyama withstand such pressure?
Right around the time when Oyama began having trouble with Mr. Sasagawa, Mr. Yanagawa started to step forward as an advisor. His name even appeared with a photograph in tournament pamphlets. There was also an occasion when Oyama, Sasagawa, and Yanagawa met together, and Yanagawa told Sasagawa, "If anything happens to Oyama, I won't stay silent." However, it's also true that within Kyokushin, there were voices saying, "Why are we using Yakuza?"
Daikaku Chodoin, known as the Last Fixer, with connections across political and business worlds, is also a ninth dan practitioner of Goju-ryu. He was one of the people who interacted with Yanagawa at the time.
Even after Sasagawa broke with Oyama, there were still people within the Federation who believed Kyokushin should be brought in, and they tried to persuade Oyama. I was involved in that as well. At the time, the pressure on Oyama was quite intense. No matter how famous he became through manga, in the history of karate, the traditional styles were overwhelmingly dominant. In some ways, he was overvalued compared to reality. There was also jealousy and resentment from other schools. The one who served as his shield was Mr. Yanagawa. I think he was the best possible insect repellent for Oyama and Kyokushin.
An event occurred that would become the catalyst for Kyokushin Karate, now equipped with an organized rule system to dramatically increase its number of students. As mentioned in the earlier interview, this was the manga Karate Baka Ichidai, which began serialization in 1971 and was based on Masutatsu Oyama. At the very beginning, it boldly states, "This is a true story, and this man really exists." It was presented as a non-fiction manga depicting Oyama's life. Here are some of the more extreme episodes portrayed in the manga. Oyama volunteers for the Kamikaze Special Attack Forces, and just as he is scheduled to sortie the next day, the war ends. Filled with frustration and rage, he begins roaming around punishing American soldiers who mistreat Japanese people. From there, the stories escalate dramatically. Killing Yakuza, killing a bull with his bare hands, knocking out a swordsman armed with a katana, and many other extraordinary feats. It is well known that Mas Oyama went to America and supposedly achieved an unbroken streak of victories against boxers and wrestlers, but this story appears to have been greatly dramatized by this work. Afterward, the story depicts him embarking on a fighting journey around the world, continuously battling martial artists from various countries and accumulating victories, ultimately concluding that Kyokushin was the strongest martial art of all. It even goes so far as to claim that he defeated a gorilla in one-on-one combat, leading the narrative into territory that is difficult to believe. Viewed from the perspective of today's information age, these episodes resemble a comedy manga more than reality. However, at the time, young people were captivated by the image of Kyokushin karate as the strongest in the world and were deeply drawn into the series. After all, the premise presented to readers was that it was non-fiction. As a result, the number of dojo students exploded. Branch dojos spread throughout Japan, and eventually that wave expanded across the world. As a side note, the story of the massively successful fighting game Street Fighter appears to have been influenced by this manga, and there are even characters that closely resemble the manga's characters themselves. In a special program about Ryoichi Sasakawa broadcast on TV Asahi on March 11, 1979, Sasakawa stated that Oyama had asked to join Zenku Ren, but was turned down. In response, Oyama immediately proposed a match between the organizations, but Sasakawa brushed him aside. In 1977, the fourth World Karate Championship tournament, hosted by Zenku Ren, was held at the Nippon Budokan. The Japanese national team was eliminated during the preliminary rounds. Karate had been exported from Japan overseas, yet following the second tournament in Paris, Japan continued to lose and ultimately recorded 3 consecutive defeats. The one who sharply criticized this humiliating state of affairs was none other than Mas Oyama and his Kyokushin Kaikan. Declaring, "Is Japanese karate really acceptable like this?" they hurled the following statement at Zenku Ren.
The fundamental reason for the 3 consecutive defeats suffered by Japan Air Federation Karate at the aforementioned tournament lies in the very nature of their insular mentality. They remain exclusionary, stuck in outdated ways, and complacently self-satisfied, while refusing to pay attention to the rapidly evolving karate overseas. In particular, the problem is that the organization has been monopolized and effectively treated as private property by a leader, Mr. Sasagawa, who knows absolutely nothing about karate. Furthermore, the people who gathered around him seeking to exploit wealth and power forgot the true spirit of Budo, turning karate into a sport, even into a kind of dance.
In addition, when Oyama was mocked by the founder of a certain martial art closely connected to Sasagawa as a karate man who delights in breaking the horns of bulls, he immediately shot back,
"Maybe not a bull's horns, but at least break a goat's horns before you start talking."
It is said that he responded along these lines. Mas Oyama trained countless outstanding students across Japan and around the world. At 8 a.m. on April 26, 1994, he died of respiratory failure caused by lung cancer at St. Luke's International Hospital in Tokyo. Shortly before his death, on April 19th, an emergency will was drafted in the presence of 5 witnesses. On April 19th, shortly before his death, Oyama left an emergency deathbed will in the presence of 5 witnesses, stating that Matsui Shokei would become his successor. However, because no notary was present and even Oyama's wife had not been informed of the will, the matter later developed into a major legal dispute. Matsui had assisted Oyama's instruction at the headquarters dojo and training camps, and had also completed the famous 100-man kumite, regarded as the harshest challenge in Kyokushin karate. Furthermore, at the 4th World Tournament, he defeated Andy Hug, who would later achieve worldwide fame in kickboxing, to win the championship. In that sense, he clearly possessed the accomplishments and qualities worthy of being named successor. However, within the Japanese martial arts world, where strict seniority traditions remain deeply rooted, it was perhaps inevitable that objections would arise over Matsui being chosen ahead of the veteran instructors who had supported Oyama since the early Oyama Dojo days. In addition, the fact that Matsui, like Oyama himself, held Korean nationality also became one of the reasons some disciples viewed the decision with suspicion. On March 17, 1997, the Supreme Court finalized a ruling denying the validity of the will. Although Oyama left behind considerable assets, he had failed to take measures such as incorporating the Kyokushin organization, which resulted in ambiguity over ownership of the assets and led to extensive legal disputes. Afterward, senior disciples of Kyokushin each asserted their own claims and authority, causing the organization to splinter repeatedly into at least 15 separate groups. Each of these organizations continued to call itself Kyokushin Karate and held its own tournaments, resulting in a situation where countless Kyokushin champions existed simultaneously. Today, the largest Kyokushin organizations are generally considered to be Matsui's faction and Midori Kenji's Shin Kyokushin, led by the champion of the 5th World Tournament. Even so, there is still no sign that the fragmentation of Kyokushin Karate will come to an end. As mentioned earlier, the work that triggered the explosive growth of Kyokushin Karate was Karate Baka Ichidai. However, despite presenting itself as a true story, the manga in reality contained a great deal of fictional embellishment. In the manga, Masutatsu Oyama is depicted violently defeating rampaging American soldiers across Japan one after another, eventually becoming a wanted man and retreating into mountain seclusion. In reality, however, considering the fact that Oyama was involved in ethnic and political movements at the time, that his life was allegedly in danger, and that actual deaths had occurred among those around him, it seems chronologically more natural, and likely closer to the truth, that he went into hiding out of necessity rather than because of incidents involving U.S. servicemen. The manga also portrays him as having volunteered for the Kamikaze Corps during the war, but this is not considered factual. Furthermore, the story that Oyama traveled to America and achieved repeated victories over wrestlers and boxers using karate became one of his most famous legends. Yet the number of matches that can actually be traced through records appears to be only 1 or 2, and one of them is said to have been fought under jujutsu-style rules. Although there are hearsay accounts and eyewitness testimonies from the time, they remain difficult to verify, and caution is necessary before treating such stories as established historical fact. Of course, these stories were directly created by the manga's authors rather than by Oyama himself. At the same time, however, there are indications that Oyama also cultivated an image consistent with the manga's heroic portrayal through his own books and interviews. In that sense, it could be said that Oyama was not merely a passive victim of myth-making, but rather existed in a mutually reinforcing relationship with the fictional world built around him. After Oyama's death, some former readers of Karate Baka Ichidai began seriously examining the credibility of its stories, gradually realizing that many of the episodes may not have been factual. In the course of this re-evaluation, it also became more widely recognized that Oyama was a man with roots in the Korean peninsula. Among those who had idolized him in their youth as Japan's strongest heroic figure, some became deeply disappointed by the gap between the image they had believed in and the historical reality, and developed strong resentment toward him. Even today, ethnic abuse and slander connected to his background continue to circulate on social media. In addition, some former senior disciples and associates who had parted ways with Oyama later shifted into openly criticizing what they viewed as his fabrications and self-mythologizing, particularly as doubts about the manga's credibility spread after his death. Some even directed ethnically charged attacks toward Korean background disciples such as Shokei Matsui, using inflammatory rhetoric to attract attention and gain followers or video views online. So then, was Oyama actually weak? Some former disciples denied Oyama's ability after his death, but the man who confronted him most directly during his lifetime was his former close associate from the Oyama Dojo days, Kenji Kurosaki. After parting ways with Oyama, Kurosaki became known for frequently mocking him in books and interviews, criticizing what he saw as exaggerated legends and cultivated charisma surrounding Oyama's image. However, even Kurosaki in his later years did not deny Oyama's actual fighting ability. Reflecting on their sparring sessions, he admitted, with visible frustration, that he had been blown away by Oyama many times, ultimately acknowledging that Oyama truly was strong. I cannot recall which publication it appeared in, but after watching a Kyokushin tournament, the Yakuza boss Yan reportedly stated in an interview that today's fighters were still nowhere near Oyama's level. He said that he had personally witnessed Oyama fighting multiple opponents several times and described him as unbelievably fast and powerful. Finally, I would like to introduce what may be the most informative episode regarding Oyama's actual fighting ability. Although Masahiko Kimura eventually parted ways with Oyama, the non-fiction book Why Didn't Masahiko Kimura Kill Rikidozan, written by the Shichite judo author Toshiya Masuda and based on extensive investigative research, contains eyewitness accounts of one of Oyama's no-rules fights. The book received both the 43rd Oyasoichi Nonfiction Award and the 11th Shincho Documentary Award. Before Masutatsu Oyama fully transitioned into professional wrestling alongside Masahiko Kimura, around 1951 to 1953, the two toured regional circuits together. During these tours, Kimura and Kokichi Endo would sometimes hold professional judo matches and at other times professional wrestling bouts. After the matches ended, they would ask the audience,
"Is there anyone who would like to challenge us?"
The one who would take on the challenges was Oyama. At one regional event, a former sumo wrestler stepped forward to challenge him. Oyama defeated him with ease. Next, a well-known All Japan class judoka challenged him, and Oyama handled him just as easily. Oyama then declared,
Both of you can come at me at the same time.
Kimura, who knew how strong Oyama really was, warned them,
"This is dangerous already. You'd better stop."
However, because Oyama was still relatively unknown at the time, the sumo wrestler and the judoka insisted, "Let us fight." As the judoka approached from behind and the sumo wrestler advanced from the front, Oyama first knocked out the judoka with a back kick, then instantly KO'd the sumo wrestler with a front kick. Both went down in a single blow. The speed of the techniques was so overwhelming that the audience erupted in shock. Both men were reportedly sent to the hospital afterward. It was said that the sumo wrestler suffered 2 broken ribs. According to the author, Kimura was extremely strict in judging a fighter's true strength and would only acknowledge martial artists he genuinely considered truly strong. Because these words came from Kimura himself, the author concludes that this episode was undoubtedly true. The author also states that Oyama defeating the university judo champion of the era in a real fight was confirmed through interviews with surrounding judoka and karate practitioners. After the incident involving Rikidozan, Oyama saw Kimura only one more time. I forget where I read this, but there's an anecdote that goes like this. One spring afternoon, perhaps while out for a walk, Kimura was slowly making his way up a gentle slope beneath the soft sunlight of the early afternoon. Oyama happened to be riding in a car on an errand at the time. Without calling out to him, he had the car slow down along the roadside and quietly watched Kimura's back as memories of their time together reportedly flashed through his mind like a lantern slideshow. Oyama was shocked by how old Kimura had become, yet he said Kimura's broad shoulders remained unchanged from the old days, though they somehow carried an air of loneliness. He continued watching him until he disappeared from view. Oyama himself passed away about a year after Kimura's death. Thank you very much for watching this video until the end. We also upload videos focusing on lesser-known aspects of Japanese martial arts from time to time, so if that interests you, please consider subscribing.